I never thought watering a few houseplants would be the thing that saved my grandson's life. My daughter called me on a Thursday evening, voice bright and easy, the way it always gets when she wants something. She and her husband were flying to Cancun the next morning, 5 days, all-inclusive resort. The kind of trip she said they'd been planning for months. Could I stop by the house on Saturday and Sunday to water the plants? Just the ones on the back porch, she said. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes each time. I said, of course, that's what fathers do. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I didn't have a bad feeling that Thursday. I didn't sense anything wrong. My daughter had always been a little scattered, a little impulsive. She was that way as a child, too, always jumping from one thing to the next. But I had never, not once, questioned whether she loved her son. That thought had never crossed my mind. I should have paid more attention to the signs. Looking back now, they were everywhere. My name isn't important. What matters is that I'm 63 years old, retired after 31 years as a licensed social worker in the state of Ohio, and I truly know in my bones what a child in distress looks like. I've pulled kids out of situations that would make your stomach turn. I've sat across from parents who smiled right at me while their children were suffering in the next room. I thought I'd seen everything. My grandson is 7 years old. I'll call him Eli. He has his mother's dark eyes and his late father's stubborn chin, and when he was born, I held him in the delivery room and made him a silent promise that I would always show up for him. His father, my daughter's first husband, a quiet and decent man named Thomas, died of a heart attack when Eli was 38 years old. No warning. Here one morning and gone by afternoon. I don't have the words for what that kind of loss does to a family, so I won't try. My daughter grieved. Then she met someone new. His name was Craig. He came into their lives about 14 months after Thomas passed, and from the start I felt, not something I could name exactly, just a small pressure behind my sternum when he was in the room. He was charming in the particular way that makes experienced people uncomfortable, always the right word, always the right laugh, always a little too interested in making sure you liked him. He and my daughter were married 11 months after they started dating. I stood at the back of the reception and watched Craig dance with Eli and told myself I was being an overprotective old man. I almost convinced myself. The thing about Craig was that he was very good at being invisible when it counted. He never raised his voice in front of me, never said anything I could point to. But Eli changed. The boy I knew was loud. He was the kind of kid who ran into a room. He narrated everything he was doing, whether you wanted him to or not. I'm building a rocket ship, Grandpa. The rocket ship is going to the moon. The moon has cheese on it, but you can't eat it because there's no atmosphere. He talked constantly, laughed easily, climbed on everything. After Craig moved in, Eli got quiet. I mentioned it to my daughter once carefully. She said Eli was just growing up, getting more mature, that 7-year-olds were different from 5-year-olds. She said it in a tone that meant the conversation was over. I let it go. That was my mistake. I let it go twice more after that, and each time I told myself she was his mother and she knew her child. And each time a small part of me knew I was choosing the easier path. The Saturday after they left for Cancun, I drove over around 11 in the morning. My daughter had left a key under the ceramic frog by the back gate, the same hiding spot she'd used since she bought the house, which I'd told her a dozen times was not exactly a security system. I let myself through the gate, watered the ferns and the 2 hanging baskets, checked that the back door was locked, and left. Nothing seemed wrong. The house was quiet. I assumed Eli was with Craig's mother, the way my daughter had mentioned when she called. I came back Sunday morning. I was reaching for the ceramic frog when I heard it. It was faint. So faint I stopped moving and held my breath, wondering if I'd imagined it. A sound from inside the house, not the television, not the hum of the refrigerator. Something smaller, something with a catch in it, the specific unsteady rhythm of a child who has been crying for a very long time and has started to forget why they're even crying anymore. I stood there for 3 full seconds. Then 31 years of professional instinct took over, and I stopped being a father and started being the person I had spent my entire career being. I used the key. The house was dark, blinds pulled, lights off, that particular stillness that settles into a place when it's been empty for days. I moved through the kitchen calling Eli's name, keeping my voice calm and even the way you learn to do, the way that says I'm not panicked, you don't need to be either. Come toward my voice. No answer. The sound was coming from upstairs. I took the steps slowly, hand on the railing, still calling his name softly. At the top of the landing, I stopped and listened. It was coming from the hallway closet, the one across from the bathroom, the one my daughter uses for extra linens and the off-season clothes she never actually puts away. There was a sliding lock on the outside of the door. A simple barrel bolt, the kind you buy at a hardware store for maybe $4. It was not a lock that had been there the last time I visited, because I would have noticed it, and because there is no reason, not one, to put a lock on the outside of a closet door in a home where a child lives. My hands were very steady when I slid it open. I am proud of that. I don't know how. Ellie was sitting in the corner of the closet, behind a basket of winter coats, knees pulled to his chest, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in the last time I visited, 11 days ago at his school's spring concert. His lips were cracked. There was an empty juice box on the floor beside him and a sleeve of crackers with maybe 6 crackers left. A plastic cup empty. A small battery-powered nightlight plugged into the outlet inside the closet, the kind shaped like a moon. The kind I had given him for Christmas 2 years ago because he went through a phase of being afraid of the dark. He looked up at me and his face did something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. It wasn't even relief, not right away. It was something older than that, something that didn't belong on a 7-year-old's face. It was the expression of a person who has stopped expecting rescue and is trying to decide if what they're seeing is real. "Grandpa," he said. His voice was so small. "I'm here," I said. "I've got you." I picked him up, and he weighed almost nothing. That was the moment my hands stopped being steady. I carried him to the kitchen and sat him on the counter and gave him water. Small sips, not too fast, the social worker in me overriding the grandfather. And while he drank, I looked around the kitchen properly for the first time. The refrigerator had a combination lock on it, not a padlock. One of those small combination locks you'd put on a luggage zipper. Someone had threaded it through the handles. The pantry cabinet had a hook-and-eye latch at the top, too high for a 7-year-old to reach. My daughter's kitchen had been child-proofed in reverse. I asked Eli how long he'd been in the closet. He thought about it the way children do when time has stopped meaning anything concrete and said he'd slept there a lot. I asked if Craig had put him there before they left for their trip. He nodded. I asked if this had happened before, not this long, but shorter times. Closet or somewhere else. He looked at the floor and said, sometimes Craig made him stay in his room with the door locked from outside when Mommy wasn't home. I asked if his mother knew about the closet this time. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she said I had to listen to Craig. I had to breathe through that one. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way you learn when you've sat across from too many rooms where someone made the choice to look away. I called 911 from the kitchen while Eli ate crackers and peanut butter that I found in the one cabinet that had been left unlocked. I gave them the address and said I had found a child who had been locked in a closet without adequate food or water for an estimated 5 days while both guardians were out of the country. I used the clinical language deliberately. I've learned over a long career that clinical language gets a faster response than emotional language. Emotion sounds like chaos. Precision sounds like evidence. 2 officers arrived within 7 minutes. A child protective services worker, a young woman who introduced herself as the on-call investigator, arrived 40 minutes after that. I stepped back and let her do her job. I stood close enough to Eli that he could see me the whole time. Because I remembered from my own years doing this work that the scariest part for a child is not the adults asking questions, it's the feeling that the one safe person might disappear. I was not going to disappear. While the investigators worked, I called my daughter's cell phone. It went to voicemail. I left a message that was brief and factual, that I had found Eli, that police and CPS were at the house, and that she needed to call me back immediately. I did not say what I wanted to say. There will be time for that later, I thought, and I was right. There was. Ellie was taken to the hospital. Mild dehydration, they said, and early-stage malnutrition. Not severe, but present, measurable. The kind that shows up on blood work and means a child has not been eating properly for longer than 5 days. The pediatric ER doctor, a brisk no-nonsense woman, asked me quietly in the hallway whether I had concerns about prior incidents. I told her everything I had observed over the past 14 months. She wrote it all down. My daughter called back 2 hours after my voicemail. She sounded confused at first, then defensive. Then when she understood what I was actually saying, she started crying and said I didn't understand, that Craig had promised Eli would be fine, that there was food in the closet, that this wasn't what it looked like. I am 63 years old. I have had that exact conversation approximately 40 times across my career. I know every word of it. Your son is in the hospital, I said. Come home. She and Craig flew back from Cancun the next morning on an emergency flight. Craig was taken into custody at the airport, which I only know because the detective on the case called to inform me. My daughter was met by CPS at the terminal. Eli remained in my custody at the hospital. I will not describe the moment my daughter walked into Eli's hospital room, because some things don't belong in a story. That moment belongs to him. The investigation moved faster than I expected, which I attribute partly to the physical evidence. The barrel lock, the refrigerator lock, the pantry latch, the blood work, and partly to something the detectives found on Craig's phone. Craig had been taking photographs. I won't go into detail about the nature of them except to say they were documentation of what he considered to be discipline, taken over a period of several months, and that when the detective told me this in the hallway outside the family services office, I had to excuse myself and stand in the parking lot for a few minutes before I could go back inside. There was also, the detective mentioned almost as an aside, a savings account. Thomas, Eli's father, my daughter's first husband, had a life insurance policy that paid out a death benefit when he died. A portion of that money had been placed in a trust for Eli's education and future care, with my daughter as trustee. Over the 14 months of Craig's presence in the household, approximately 60% of the trust had been withdrawn. The withdrawals corresponded almost exactly to Craig's credit card purchases: a boat, a set of custom wheels for his truck, 5 nights at a resort in Nashville the previous October, the Cancun trip. He had been spending a dead man's money on himself while locking that dead man's son in the closet. I've worked in social services for over 3 decades. I've seen greed. I've seen cruelty. I've seen people who thought children were an inconvenience to be managed. I've rarely seen all 3 so neatly packaged in one person. The legal process took 8 months. I won't walk through every step because most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Hearings, evaluations, guardian ad litem appointments. A trial that was mercifully shorter than anticipated because Craig's attorney negotiated a plea. Craig entered a guilty plea on charges of child endangerment, child abuse, and financial exploitation of a trust. He was sentenced to 7 years, with the first 4 mandatory. He will be required to register and he will not be permitted contact with minors upon release. My daughter lost custody of Eli. I want to be careful here, because she is still my child, and this is the hardest thing I have ever had to write. What she did, what she chose not to do, which is its own kind of doing, cannot be undone. The court found that she had been aware of locked-door incidents prior to the Cancun trip and had failed to act. Her attorney argued that Craig was controlling and manipulative, that she was in a psychologically compromised position, and those things may be true. The judge acknowledged them and still terminated her parental rights because the law, when it works the way it is supposed to, does not grade on a curve when a child's safety is at stake. She is getting help. I know that. I hope it continues. I was granted full legal guardianship of Eli in the spring, on a Tuesday afternoon in a Cuyahoga County courtroom with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly the whole time. The magistrate asked Eli, they do that now, they ask children to have a voice, whether he wanted to live with me. He was sitting in a chair that was a little too big for him, feet not quite touching the floor, wearing the clip-on tie I'd bought him that morning because he'd seen it at the drugstore and asked if he could be dressed up. He said yes. Then he looked at me and said, "Can we get a dog, Grandpa?" The magistrate actually smiled. It has been 14 months since I opened that closet door. I want to tell you that Eli bounced back immediately. The children are resilient and he was fine within a few weeks and we moved on. Some of that is true. Children are resilient in ways that would humble you if you let yourself really see it. But some of it is not so simple. He sees a trauma therapist every week, a good one, a woman who uses play therapy and never rushes him and sends me brief notes after each session to let me know how he's doing. He has made progress that genuinely moves me. He also still sleeps with the hallway light on. He does not like it when I close interior doors. He gets quiet sometimes in a specific way that I recognize now. And when that happens, I find something to do in whatever room he's in. Close enough that he knows I'm there. Far enough that I'm not hovering. We got the dog, a rescue mutt named Biscuit, part beagle and part something indeterminate and entirely chaotic, who has taken it upon herself to sleep across Eli's feet every night and follow him from room to room like a small, devoted satellite. I retired twice, technically, once from social work and once from the idea that my responsibilities to the people I love diminish with age. The second retirement didn't take. I don't mind. My daughter calls on Sundays. We talk for a while. It is careful and partial and sometimes painful, and I think it is also necessary, not for the reasons I used to think. I no longer believe that forgiveness is something you perform for the sake of the other person, but because Eli asks about her sometimes, and I want to be able to tell him, honestly, that I don't speak of his mother with hatred, that I hope she gets to be someone different than she was, that I am watching to see. I told you at the beginning that I never thought watering a few houseplants would save my grandson's life. I meant it, but I thought about it differently since then. I don't think it was the plants. I think it was 31 years of learning to listen for sounds that don't fit, of believing children when they go quiet, of staying in a room long enough to notice what other people walk past. I stopped by to water the plants. I stayed because something told me to listen. And he was there, behind a basket of winter coats, waiting for someone to open the door. I keep thinking about the barrel bolt, $4 at any hardware store. That's what stood between my grandson and anyone finding him. A $4 piece of metal that someone had to make a deliberate choice to install, to slide shut, and to walk away from. That's the part that stays with me. Not the dramatic moments, not the courtroom, not even opening that closet door. It's the ordinary sequence of decisions that had to happen before I got there. Someone had to buy the lock. Someone had to screw it into the door frame. Someone had to put a 7-year-old inside and slide it closed. And then someone had to board a plane to a resort in Cancun and order a drink by the pool. Every terrible thing in this story started with a choice made when no one was watching. That's how I understand what happened to Eli, not as a single catastrophic event, but as the accumulated weight of small surrenders. Craig's cruelty didn't arrive all at once. It built, slowly, in the spaces my daughter chose not to look at. And that's the harder truth I've had to sit with. Evil rarely announces itself. It installs itself quietly, a little at a time, and it counts on the people nearby to keep giving it the benefit of the doubt. I spent 31 years in social work believing that the most important thing I could offer any child was the combination of seeing clearly and acting on what I saw, not waiting for certainty, not softening the facts to make them more comfortable. Just, what is actually happening in front of me, and what does this child need right now? I failed to apply that same clarity to my own family for 14 months, because I loved my daughter and I wanted to believe she had made a good choice. And wanting something to be true is one of the most dangerous things a person can do. What I know now, what this experience has pressed into me like a thumbprint in wet clay, is that good character is not about your intentions. It's about what you do in the moment you realize your intention and your action have separated. My daughter intended to be a good mother. She failed to act like one when it mattered most. Those two things can both be true. And the second one is the one that determines what happens to a child. Ellie teaches me this. Still, 14 months on, he has every reason to be broken. He has every reason to have given up on adults, on safety, on the idea that someone will come. Instead, he wakes up every morning and drags Biscuit off his feet and comes downstairs and asks what's for breakfast. He goes to therapy and works through the hard parts without being asked. He sat in a chair with his feet off the floor in a courtroom and told the truth about what happened to him. That is not resilience in the easy, inspirational poster sense of the word. That is a 7-year-old exercising a kind of quiet daily courage that most adults I know could not manage. He earns it every day through effort, not through having been spared. I think about the kind of man I want him to become, and then I think about what I actually have to show him, not what I tell him, but what I do. Whether I show up, whether I say the hard thing or the comfortable thing, whether I stay in the room. He was waiting behind a basket of winter coats because someone chose to leave. I intend to spend whatever years I have left making sure he knows what the other choice looks like.